Yeah.
Welcome back to the podcast, Indestructible Souls, with your man, Jonathan Beauregard. And, we were here about a week or so ago talking about the George Floyd incident. And so, once again, the format for the podcast is mental wellness for African American men and boys. And so today we're going to focus on boys in the education system. And so I do have a featured guest that's going to be joining me pretty soon. But for the time being, one of the things I wanted to talk about is our boys, meaning black boys, in the education system. Oftentimes, even for myself growing up and going through the education system, many times people believe that African American boys particularly struggle in the school system, whether it's grades, whether it's behavior, whether it's performance, whatever it may be. But people never talk about the reasons why. Are our counterparts just smarter than us, more dedicated than us in the education system? Or is the system broken? And also, is the system built against us? So here we are again. We're not even talking about the larger sense of society in that sense. We're talking about the education school system, the educational system that every black boy and every child must go through. Now, here's part of the problem. Not only in society, the system's not built for us, but when we look at the school system, it has been proven, and we've already talked about this, and we talked about it a lot, is that our education system is a pipeline to prison, to drugs, to criminal activity, and so forth. And you may wonder why and may not get it. So I'm going to talk about it just briefly. So today my featured guest is Danielle Johnson, and I'm going to bring her in a minute. But I wanted to point out a few things when we talk about the education system in black boys. Now, one of the things is that here are some known facts, is that even start as early as preschool, they see us differently, for one. They treat us differently. The punishments are harsher, and they're more quick to expel us, suspend us, but also put us in special education classes, label our kids as troublemakers, whatever it may be. So even in preschool, one of the things that we know for a fact is, and they've done a lot of studies, is that they took and you can research this stuff, I'm not going to get too technical, but they took a group of teachers, particularly white teachers, and gave them a scenario on paper of some kids' behaviors, and the teacher was supposed to decide if the behaviors were appropriate, something that needed correcting, and what was the punishment. So based off of the names, the description of the kids, the teachers came up with harsher punishments and harsher consequences when they perceive the kid to be black or minority. And so, just a quick story, even my grandson, who was in preschool, they wanted to kick him out of preschool for being a high energy um, kid, a lot of energy, likes to play, and all of those things. So it even starts in preschool. And here's what happened. They call the parents, come get him, whatever it may be. He switched schools to where the educators are more equipped to deal with African American kids, and everything was fine. So here's what we know is that there's a clear disconnection when it comes to African American boys in the school system. For one, it's another system that's not built for us. And the thing is, if when we go to school and we already feel like we don't belong and we don't feel like the teacher cares and we don't feel like the teacher wants to listen or understand us, there's already a disconnect. We know that the punishments are harsher. And so one of the things that teachers don't, or educators, I don't want to keep picking on teachers, but educators don't understand that for us as African Americans, it's going to be hard to teach us and educate us if you don't build relationships with us first. One of the keys to success when it comes to education is, does not only the student have a relationships with their teachers, but does the parents have a relationship with the teachers, the administrators, the school board, the school district? Do those officials from the teachers on up know who you are? So this is a situation that's on both of us. It's on the education system, but it's also on us as parents to make sure that our kids are getting proper education and that they're not being pigeonholed and kicked out of school at a higher rate. I'm not going to give you all of the numbers, but black preschoolers are 3 times more likely to receive 1 or more suspensions out of school. 3 times more likely. We are more likely to be suspended. We only make up about 8% of the school population, but suspended at about a 15 or 20%. Whereas other students make up a higher percentage, but yet they're suspended at a lower rate. Now, here's the problem is who are advocating for our students if the parents aren't? So today, one of the things that I want to talk about is, are there alternatives to traditional education? Are we staying involved in our kids' educational process? Are we going up there seeing what our kids are involved in? Now, here's the nasty truth. Mostly for black parents, the only time that black parents get involved at a certain age, in elementary school, everything is cute. They get the awards, they perform in some type of play or whatever it may be. But right around late elementary school, middle school, the parents disappear out of the process unless their kids are athletes or performing. They don't. We don't. A lot of times we don't participate in the PTA. We miss parent-teacher conferences when something's going on at the school, meaning trouble. Oftentimes we don't advocate for our own. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is, what are some of the challenges that our boys go through for the education system? Because it's not always fit for us. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the solutions? And then also, what are some alternatives? And I've been an athlete all my life, for most of my life. And one of the things that I think it's time that boys more options other than athletics or some type of entertainment. Think about that. For some reason, that continues to be our out when there are so many other opportunities. So I would like for you guys to meet my guest, Miss Danielle Johnson. I'm going to bring her on, and you're going to see her in a second. And she's a former Marine, so I want to thank her for her service. But also, she's raised 3 boys that are at different levels of the education system. So let me go ahead and bring her on. Hey, Danielle, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself? I can.
All right. So I'm just going to need you to speak up just a little bit.
Okay. Is that better?
Um, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So today, what we're talking about is black boys in the education system. It is that our system. What happens is we stigmatize our boys, right? So if you think about it,
Yep.
after preschool, the school system is our boys' first introduction into the real world.
Right.
And the sad part about it is, or I won't say the sad part. What I will say is the challenging part of it is that's how our boys begin to see themselves, whether they're performing well in school, whether they're being labeled as not equipped as other boys, whatever it may be. So we'll get into all of that. So right now, can you introduce yourself to everyone? Once again, thank you for your service in the Marines. How long were you a Marine?
8.5 years.
So 8.5 years. And you have how many boys?
I have 3 sons. My oldest, Deontay, is 21. I have a 16-year-old sophomore right now, and I have a 6-year-old. Well, I guess he's now a junior, but a 6-year-old who just completed the first grade.
So 6 years. So because you have boys that are in different areas of went through the education system, can you tell us what were some of the challenges that you've had to face in relationship to the school system and bring up boys?
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you're talking about this now because my 6-year-old actually kind of had an issue this school year. Well, I'll start with his kindergarten year. He started kindergarten and he got tested. The district he goes to school in has a accelerated kindergarten program, and he got tested in that program when he was 4 years old, and he scored quite high. And we got to pick what school he went to, and his kindergarten teacher was phenomenal. She was phenomenal, and she was very inclusive for all students. They learned about so many different things. I'm Shamefully, I was surprised at some of the things he was coming home and telling me about, because it's just things that I wasn't expecting for him to learn. And I was happy. He was learning about more than just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and those kind of things in Black history. He was learning about more in-depth things. But also, I was surprised because my 2 older boys had never learned those things. But his teacher was she had a class of 22 students who were all tested and identified as gifted. And if you know anything about gifted children, they have all kind of different things that some of them might be great at math, some might be great at reading, but she found a way to reach out to each individual student and make them all feel included. So I was very relieved with that because that was one of my concerns with him, like you said, that being his first introduction to public school and all of that. Fast forward to his first grade year, that was not his experience.
So what
His
was more
teacher was
experience in the first grade?
in first grade, his teacher, he called it picked on him. And when I would ask him how was she picking on you? Well, she always calls my name and she always tells me to clip down, and I'm talking to my friend and my friend is talking to me and I have to clip down, but my friend doesn't have to clip down because they have the color clip, their clips down on their name, or their name, the clip has their name on it and they move it to the whatever color.
So basically, that's the
So,
behavior throughout the day.
correct.
Okay.
So the first couple of times, I tried to talk to him at home and I would send her a message. And even her messages back to me were very harsh. It was, and my initial face-to-face conversation with her was like, I told her, I said, your words come across harsh. Even though it's a text, it's harsh. And my feeling is, if that's how you're communicating with me as an adult, how are you talking to children?
Right.
And she was very defensive, and I made her very aware. He is a very active student, and like you said, that label, she wanted to label him as having ADD, and well, I think he might have ADD. No, he's just bored. You need to keep him engaged.
And not to cut you off, and I'm gonna let you continue.
No, you're fine.
One of the things is that they oftentimes, and you could check the numbers, is that they want to put us in special ed at a higher rate, and they also want to label us, which is going to have a stigma throughout our educational experience. But go ahead. And the numbers,
Correct.
numbers prove it.
Absolutely. So out of one, I have 3 sons, and my oldest son was identified as having ADD in the 4th grade. And from the 4th grade through high school, I had to have an IEP meeting every year. I had to do special accommodations. So I can relate on both ends. And I told her, like, this is not ADD. I almost can tell you what ADD is, and that's not it, and I tried to teach him, you need to learn how to communicate. You need to learn, all your teachers are not going to be like your kindergarten teacher. You got to learn how to deal with all people. I would talk to her and try to come up with other solutions. Is there something else we can have him do? Is there somewhere else he can sit? Then she moved him to the back of the classroom. Well, he doesn't pay attention. Then she put him so far up in the classroom where his desk is touching the wall in the front. Well, he can't, and she just wasn't willing to assist me. I'm a very present parent, I'm not just there for parent teacher conference or when he's in trouble. I'm there for everything, the highs, the lows. I volunteer in classrooms, all of that. And she just wasn't, she wasn't bending. And my next step was I brought in the principal, and maybe you can talk to her, because she's just not listening to me. And, he would come home in tears. He rides the bus to and from school, and his bus ride is about 50 minutes. And he's getting off the bus crying. And I'm like, why are you? She's just so mean to me. They feel that, you know what I mean? And he felt that.
Right. And so to your point, one of the things, and I worked for a few years in what they call early wraparound, and this is where we go into the schools and work with kids with troubled behaviors. And oftentimes we would see them singling out black boys or black kids and separating them away from the students, putting them in the back of the class, or singling them out, labeling their behavior as, disruptive. And keep in mind, this is their introduction into society. So now if the teacher who I'm supposed to trust and who I'm supposed to believe in is telling me I'm a bad kid, how do you think that works on a kid's self-esteem? So
absolutely.
So when he was coming home and crying, tell me the actions that you took to fix it, and what was the results?
Well, my first thing is I have to calm him, to bring him down and let him know how important he is to not only his family, but to the world in general. Like, you are a very important person. You cannot let this one individual dictate how, because I'm just a bad kid. And no, you're not. No, you're not. You may have had a bad day. You may have had a bad moment, but you're not a bad kid, So I had to build him up. Not that that was a problem for me, but I had to build him up even more than I would have to on a normal basis. And I was attempting to teach him how to deal with difficult people and difficult teachers, but that ended up backfiring on me because it got to a point where he just did not want to go to school because he did not want to be in that environment. And this is a kid that is brilliant and loves school, and it got to the point where he just didn't enjoy school anymore. So we made the decision as parents to remove him from that environment. We tried from August to December, And when it was time to go back to school in January, he literally cried for an hour before he got on the bus because he didn't want to go back. She's just so me. That was after being out of school for 3 weeks. What do
Right.
you mean? You know, so it just,
So,
he was borderline traumatized.
right. So tell us what ultimately happened and how is your son performing now?
What ultimately happened was in January when they went back to school, my husband and I made the decision to remove him from his gifted class into what they refer to as a mainstream first grade class, which is just a regular first grade class, kids that are not above or below. He ended up in a man's class who we didn't even make it through the first week, and he was like, oh my God, this kid is amazing. He's so smart. Is it okay if I send him to a second grade class for the bulk of the day? Because what I'm teaching him, he already knows. Kind of on the fence with that simply because of age. You know, he's 6 years old and the school year just ended. He's still 6. So our concern is more maturity level. But he went to that second grade class and he soared even during distant learning. He was going back and forth to both classes. Sometimes he would check in with the first grade. But he felt more important. He felt, and his teachers uplifted him and told him how great he was. And, you know, because the teacher we moved him to can kind of tell that his spirit had been broke.
Right.
He was such a happy kid at that school. Everybody knew him. Everybody wanted a hug from him, but his spirit had been broken.
And
they went above and beyond to build him back up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me just pause there because, and for the parents that are listening, I really want you to hear that because that happens more often than not. So
Yes.
really think about, as your kids are entering into the school system, who they are before they start the school system. And by the time they get into first grade, into middle of elementary, do you see a shift? Do you see a shift in their confidence? Do you see a shift in how they believe in themselves? And part of that is because the school system itself, and when we talk about teachers, we would talk about teachers who are just like police officers who come to a community to teach our kids.
Yes.
But they want to paint every kid with the same paintbrush. And that's not effective for African American boys. For one, we learn differently. For two, we're not the same. And here's the thing. If you show us as teachers that you care and you believe in us, we'll outperform just about anybody in the classroom. So let's talk about this real quick. Let's shift. And when it comes to parent involvement, how important is parent involvement? And I'll qualify it real quick. As I worked with students in schools, one of the things that I noticed is that my very presence changed the teacher's attitude towards kids. He's this, he's that, he's disruptive, and he talks back. But the moment that they realized somebody was on this kid's team, their attitude changed. So
absolutely.
So tell us, how important is it for parents to be involved and not just in sports or when your kids are performing?
Listen, I'm involved from the first day of school to the last day of school, even with this distant learning. And my son that just finished up his sophomore year, my expectation for the first week of school, if you start on a Monday or Tuesday, I expect you to bring me those syllabi. And I look at them. I email every single teacher from my personal email. This is how you contact me. This is my phone number. I'm a very active parent. I'm very present. If you have any issues, please do not hesitate to call. And it gets to the point with teachers that when you initiate that, I very rarely get negative calls. I get, oh, he's doing so well, or your student is, even my son's freshman year in high school, his English teacher asked us to write her a letter explaining who we believe are. And in that letter, I expressed to her, English is not his strong suit. Please stay on him. He does not like to read. He does not enjoy writing. If you have any issues with any of his assignments, please let me know. And her rebuttal to me, maybe 5 to 6 weeks later, was like, I don't see the student that you mentioned in that letter. He is outperforming every student in this classroom. He's reading all the books. He has done book reports. He has written all the papers, which I was pleased, but I want her to know what his history was. His past was usually in English is something I have to stay on him about, but she did not hesitate to respond, call, whatever, and reach out to me and tell me how she appreciated how honest I was. And like I said, I would get more positive feedback from teachers versus the negative. I only got one negative phone call. He just finished up his second year in high school, and I got one negative phone call in 2 years, and I'm okay with that.
So do you also make yourself familiar with not only the teachers but the principals, school board members, and
Absolutely.
things like that? Can you talk about that for a minute?
I make my presence. I try to attend as many PTA meetings as I can. I try to go to, they have an African American council. I try to go to those meetings and meet there. I make it a point to introduce myself to the principal, the assistant principal, his counselor, because not only I want you to put a face to a name, but I need to put a face to a name, and I need to know who I need to contact in case something happens. And it's not just like you said, my kid isn't getting any playing time, because that's the one thing I'm not going to the school about. I'm not going to the school about playing time or what's happening on the field or what, unless it's something derogatory or, you know what I mean, something but playing time and things of that nature, I don't get involved in that. So it's vitally important for parents to make their faces known, their names known, and you get to know them as well, because I believe you can kind of feel the energy and know what kind of individual your kids are interacting with on a daily basis if you put yourself in that environment.
Right. So I believe there's the DAPAC in Rialto, then there's APAC. Those are the different African American parent associations. Mm-hmm. So I want to encourage people to become involved in those meetings and know who your school board members are. Not only that, but know who your parent advocate is or your student advocate, and really maintain a relationship with teachers, not just when someone's performing and not when something's going wrong, because oftentimes the problem can snowball before we can get a handle on it. So
1 second, Johnny. Let me mention this too. Something else that is some teachers, not all, like to try to identify our students. My youngest son's first grade teacher, the one we removed him from, one of her questions when I met with her face to face, she had well, is dad in the home?
Interesting.
And I mean, I was blown back because, interestingly enough, my older two boys I raised great part by myself, but this one, dad is definitely in the home and definitely active. And I was just like, yes, he is. Right. Oh, I was just curious.
But
and it just.
But that speaks to what I was saying earlier, is that one of the things is that these school systems, and I'm not picking on teachers, I'm picking on the education system itself. They're going to put forth an effort. They're going to educate us based off of their perception of who we are. So therefore, they're not going to put forth the same effort, energy, and yet again, here we go with the same thing, in that when they see certain behaviors, they treat it more harshly. They suspend us at a more harsher rate. They label us differently and have this expectation that we all come from broken homes. But here's the thing. Even when things aren't right at home or aren't right in our environment, they don't take those things into consideration. And so they grade us.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. They grade us with a different scorecard. And I don't know if parents understand that. And if you have unleashed your children into the school system and have not kept a active eye on it, have not been actively participating, and know who your teachers are, you're setting them up to fail. And I'm not talking about helping them with homework. I'm specifically talking about staying involved and not. Here's the thing. if your kid act out, you need to go advocate a solution, not allow them to
Yes.
suspend your kid, not allow them to expel them, treat them more harshly. If there's some correction that's needed, you need to be a part of that process and not just
Yes.
allow them to do what they will. And so I
Yes.
think that's extremely important. But I'm not surprised that she asked you that question. And
I was. I was surprised and I was
well,
offended.
you should have been offended. But for me, I'm not surprised from what I see in the system and what I've seen when going in and out of various schools. I've been in schools throughout San Bernardino County, and I see the same thing. And what I see is that our kids are being labeled, our kids are being singled out, our kids are being stigmatized, our kids are being treated differently. Now, here's the thing. Here is facts, 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 facts. That the education system as it is built is a pipeline to prison or worse for African American boys. And so if parents don't get actively involved, we're setting our boys up to fail. In the discussion. We're setting them up.
I agree.
Now, let me
I
ask you
agree.
this question. Let me ask you this question. How do you feel about alternative education? And what I mean by outside of traditional education, what do you think about homeschooling or other forms of education?
Funny you ask learning. I'm personally right now looking into different forms of education simply because my 6-year-old thrived with distant learning these last few months. And I was able to see more in depth what other teachers have said. Like, he learns so quickly. And they give a block of education for things, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks to learn something. And he learns it and masters it in 2 to 3 days sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, he's bored. And once he's bored, if you're in class, he's in la la land, because he's no longer engaged. He's no longer learning. He loves to learn, but he just learns so quickly that I might have to do something else with him. You know what I mean? Whereas my 16-year-old, he needs that. He needs to go into school. He needs to, the homeschooling wasn't okay for him. He did great because I stayed on him. I'm not going to tolerate any, you know what I'm saying? You're not doing your schoolwork. That's your responsibility.
Correct.
But he needed to get out and go to school and be engaged with teachers and, because he's just not the kid that wants to do, like, I wouldn't foresee him doing online classes in college, things of that nature. He's going to class.
Right.
So just with those two, my own 2 children, they're very different ends of the spectrum, very different children. So I'm not opposed to alternative education. And I think it is important because I know my kid. So, it's not like you said, it's not a same paintbrush for all students. You can't teach everybody the exact same. And I don't know that many teachers know how to do that. In my experience, I don't know that.
Right. And I may be wrong on this, but this is my opinion, is that teachers teach for test scores. They don't teach for learning. And what I mean by that, teachers are graded based off of the kids' test scores and spend all year long trying to prepare kids for these standardized tests, but that's not how Black people learn. Historically, we learn, we're visual and audio learners. And so if you look at who we are as a people, I'm not saying we can't read a book and learn and those things, but we learn differently. So what are some of so after you got involved, what were some of the very noticeable changes that you saw? Noticeable changes.
In my son?
Yes.
Or he's a much happier kid. He's excited about school. Well, he was excited about going to school. He would come home and he would get off the bus and into the school year. How was your day? It was good. He was just so so down, and we'd have to go through all kind of things to get him laughing. But once we changed his classroom, he was so much more happier. And it was, what did you do in school today? Or how was your day? Oh, it was great. I did this, and he was excited to tell us about his day at school.
Okay. And how about your relationship with the teachers? How tell us about your relationships with the various teachers that you've had to encounter.
His first teacher, I come to find. So let me just touch on this. When I would go at the beginning of the school year, when I would go to the office to either speak to the principal or somebody, the assistant principal, faculty, from the librarian to the TK teacher to even the one of the ladies that worked in the cafeteria, would approach me and tell me, "Hey, if Keith needs a hug, tell him he can come to me. Or if Keith needs a minute, he's more than well." And it totally caught me off guard. I thought nothing of it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Now I understand, because they were even seeing how he was treated and how sad he was. So with that teacher is no longer employed in that capacity. She no longer, because I wasn't letting up. I was fighting for, and like I told the principal, yes, he is my concern, but my first concern was I wasn't the first parent of a minority boy that was complaining about her. So that was my first concern. I didn't know that, right, but I was told that. My next concern was, once I remove him from the class, she's just going to find somebody else. Right. And I don't want that for that kid either, because that kid may not have a parent coming to advocate for them. So that was my next concern. So I just kind of just kept pushing until not only he was removed from the class, but I found out there was some resolution with her. Because it sounds to me, if I'm the fifth parent, it sounds to me that the students aren't the problem so much as she's the problem. She has a problem teaching this group of students. And if that's her issue, then she needs to be removed. These are kids, and they're going to be kids, So his other teachers, the teachers that he moved to, we have a great relationship. Matter of fact, I text one today because I sent her thank you, just thank you for lifting him up and bringing him back to where he was to finish out this school year strong. So I have a great rapport, even with the school district. His kindergarten year, I got sent to Maryland as a parent advocate for GATE students. Okay. I have a very good rapport with his school, the district, and I talking about that. That's the other thing, because I tell people, I want you to treat me like a parent of a student. I don't want you to treat me like a parent, like, oh, she knows somebody at the district. You know what I mean? I want to get, and I'll get the real you if you think I'm just Keith's parent.
So, what to kind of end this segment, what would you encourage parents throughout, not just elementary school, middle school, and high school? What would you encourage parents to do in terms of involved in getting to know educators, getting to know teachers? What would you suggest?
I would suggest at the beginning of the school year, if you can, I know everybody's job doesn't allow them, if you can go to back to school night and just work your way around the school. The principal is usually walking around. Introduce yourself to the principal. Go to the library. Introduce yourself. Make your presence known. Let it be known that you are there for your children. I would also suggest you build a rapport with the teacher and make sure you're something else. When I had his parents, she told us to every parent-teacher conference, because I don't want it to be, oh, well, your teacher said this, and I don't want the in-between. Have a conversation, and then if we need to come to some solutions, we come to solutions together. If it's something that we need as adults, then I send him to sit out. But involve your children. Let your children, because kids are going to be kids, and you don't want your kid coming home telling you one thing and then going to school telling the teacher something else. Involve your children. Let them be a part of the conversation. Stay informed.
So,
and for awards and presentation up as much as you can. And if you can't show up because of your job commitment, make that be known as well. Hey, I'm at work, but these days I'm available.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so once and talking about this, and thank you for your service. And you know, it's well. Let me. I'm gonna quickly because your boys, 3 African American boys. How are they doing during this time? And when we talk about the George Floyd and what are some of your concerns, and how are this political climate right now?
You know, my 16 and 22-year-old, they're starting to get it. Well, he's 21. He'll be 22 in a couple months. He's starting to get it because I've been preaching to him since Trayvon Martin, because, you know, kids like to keep the headphones in their ears. They love wearing hoodies. And I tell them, dude, don't keep your headphones in your ear with your hoodie on walking down the street, because if they approach you from the back and say, hey, stop, and you don't stop, next thing they're doing now is shooting. You're not listening. You're not complying. They're not paying attention that you can hear them, or you didn't even turn around to, you know, show that you're ignoring them. So they're starting to get it that you can be doing something as simple as jogging and you're a target. So you keep your eye. It's sad, the climate we're in. It's sad that I'm having these conversations and I'm telling it on a swivel. And I'm not a fan of the police, but I don't tell my children that. Okay. And I don't tell them that because I don't need them being boys and being out here FTPing and all that other stuff. You know what I'm saying? But you need to be aware. Keep your head on a swivel. You know, stay aware. Stay out of the streets. Don't do all this looting and rioting. It's peaceful protest is what I'm preaching. You know, but it's very scary right now. It is very, very scary.
Right. We got to protect our boys. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you for participating in the podcast, and I appreciate you. So I'm going to go ahead and take you out, and then take you off the screen, and then we're going to wrap this up. But I appreciate you.
All right. No problem.
So Miss Danielle Johnson talking about her boys' experience through the education system. Now, here's why this is important. I know we just started summer, but here's the thing. Parents have to stay active throughout your boys' education process. And the fact of the matter is, all of our kids aren't going to be athletes. All of our kids aren't going to be performers. And there are so many different opportunities out there that we got to make sure that we are allowing our boys to explore their creativity, explore their interest, other than what the norm is or the stereotypical norm. Now, as far as the educational system is concerned, here are some of the things that it's very important. And I'm just going to hone this down and we'll end for tonight. It's important to build teacher relationships. You got to know your teachers. You got to know who they are, and not be afraid to, when something goes wrong, to call the teacher or the educators out on the carpet. The fact of the matter is, just like when we look at other systems in society, there's inherent biases that affect our children. There's no way around it. We engage. I'm not saying we don't teach respect. We need to have an expectation of respect of teachers, going to class, paying attention, all those things. The other thing is we have to motivate. Here's the thing. You can't motivate your kid if you're not involved. Period. You have to stay involved in their education process throughout, not just elementary when everything's cute. Middle school. Now, from a therapist standpoint, keep in mind your kids are constantly changing, which means their needs are constantly changing, which is going to affect their educational experience, emotionally, mentally, If any of you have middle schoolers out there, you know what I'm talking about. Kids in middle school are one big ball of emotion. At that age, they're just absolutely crazy, which means parents have to shift, which means we also have to make sure that their needs are being met even in middle school, because at that point we're talking about poor confidence, poor self-esteem, and now they're bigger. So which means if they're having altercations at school, they're more likely to get suspended or expelled. It's a known fact. There's no way around it. Once again, I don't want to bore you with numbers, but when we talk about the educational system, like any other system in this American society, we have to be intentional about how we navigate that system. Parents, get involved, know who your educators are, not just the teacher, not just the principal. I'm talking school board meetings. I'm talking the different associations, PTA, DayPAC, APAC, all those other PAC meetings. We have to be involved and have to have a presence. I've attended some of those meetings. The sad part about those meetings, they're great meetings. The sad part about the meetings is that the people who need to be there oftentimes aren't there. So you can go to your local school district's website and you can find out where all of these meetings are. Now, let me wrap this up, and I appreciate you for watching and viewing. If you're on Twitter, if you're on what is the other one? YouTube, please subscribe, please like it. If you're on Facebook, please follow. Now, here's the thing. We are not underperformers. As you can see throughout history, American boys, we can outperform anyone. We're not, when it comes to education, we're not dumber. We can perform, but however, we are different. And anybody, and I've heard since this whole George Floyd thing came up, people always say, I don't see color, I don't see color. So for all my white comrades out there, that's not the answer. To say, I don't see color. And here's the reason why that's important even in the school system. The answer is, I want you to see my color. I want you to see who I am, but I want you to honor it and respect it. Because when you say you don't see my color, you're telling me you don't see my experience. You don't see who I am. You don't see the differences. And so when you approach me and when you have to educate me, it's not going to be always like little Johnny or whoever that, the ones we like to lift up, right? I learn differently. If I perceive you don't like me, I can't learn from you. Oftentimes, things can be resolved with a simple conversation, compassion, motivation, encouragement. So parents, here's the thing. Do not abandon your kids inside this system. And I'll tell you a quick story. So yeah, now here I sit as a licensed therapist with a master's degree, but it wasn't always that way. And real quick, and I don't want to, get too much into it. Throughout my educational system, through elementary, through high school, it has always been a challenge. And I've always had to fight for what was freely given to other students. I've been suspended several times. I've been told that I wouldn't get anything higher than some type of trade certificate. I even had a teacher say, because of an essay I wrote on race, I wrote an essay, and this teacher said he can have the classroom. Either he go or I go. So oftentimes, my mother and my grandmother stayed on campus, not just for me, but for all of us. They knew who my mother was. They knew who my grandmother was, because we had to fight to get equal education. And this is in the 80s and the 70s and 80s or whatever. because they advocated. They would have expelled me several times if they could have, if I didn't have someone advocating and saying, no, you're not going to pigeonhole my son, and you're not going to pigeonhole these kids and have them out on the street. And that's been my own experience. So when we talk about the school system, the educational system for African American boys, it is just another system in American society that we're behind the eight ball, that we have to fight harder and be better than our counterparts just to get equal recognition. Think about that. I remember how badly other kids acted in what they call college prep classes and so forth. And each year I had to have my parents come up there to make sure that they kept me in those classes. Why is that? Now here's the thing. And so this isn't bash, whoever month. But the thing is, this is real. You could check the numbers. We're suspended at a higher rate. Our punishments are harsher than our counterparts because they see us differently. We are sent to special education at a higher rate. And they want to diagnose us with some type of mental health disorder at a higher rate. How about treating us differently, taking a different approach, and understanding that the system is built against us and trying something new? So here's what I want to say, and here's how I want to end for the parents, the teachers, the educators, but specifically African American boys that are in the school system. Don't allow the system to kill your spirit. Don't allow the system to kill your dreams. Now, like I said before, I was an athlete most of my life. So I'm not saying don't have dreams about being an athlete. Football paid for my education. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're more than that. We're engineers, we're lawyers, we're doctors, we whatever we want to be. And guess what? Being a manager at somewhere, being a carpenter, being the plumber, all of those things, there's nothing wrong with them. Don't allow the education system to kill our spirit and set us up for prison or death. So thank you for listening. This has been Indestructible Soul. They may be able to lock us up, whatever, but they can't have our soul. They want it, but they can't have it. And this is Jonathan Beauregard. Thank you for listening, and we're out. Thank you very much.